LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the March 20th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. It's the first day of spring, and it looks like the Trump indictments will be blooming. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you like what I'm doing. Today I'll show you the 14 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, which would be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the video title, the topic is, will Trump be arrested this week? It looks like there is some indictment coming out of New York, possibly, at least if you can believe Donald Trump's tweet over the weekend, which I'll get to in a moment. But I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be using my special perspective as a liberal former criminal defense attorney to give you my perspective on this, or did I say perspective twice? Well, the thing is, as a liberal, I really want to see Trump held accountable for, he's broken so many laws over the years and never been charged, never been convicted. And given all the people with much less money and power who are ground up by our criminal legal system all the time, as a liberal, I'd like to see some accountability there. But then as a criminal defense attorney, I know about our criminal justice system. I know prosecutors aren't all that reliable or honest. Police officers, prosecutions often have real difficulties and problems that and flaws that I can also point out. And so I will be committing some legal analysis. And if you look down in the video description, you'll see some of the sources I'll be referring to, both in the short summaries and the clip list. And then you can see the full sources down under sources. I arguably have four political comedy clips this week, starting with the Trump TruthSocial post that I was mentioning at the beginning there. Here you can see a copy of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, and you'll see it referred to in multiple news summaries. The thing about this is, like, almost every single word here is false. False. I mean, even the word arrested and Tuesday, like the two most important words in here, right? Where it says, I will be arrested on Tuesday. That's tomorrow, and it looks like the Tuesday's not going to happen. Also looks like he's not going to be arrested. If he actually is indicted, if there are criminal charges brought by the grand jury in New York, he'll probably be allowed to surrender himself without ever being arrested. So all of that is false. And then at the end, it ends, this was problematic for a lot of people, protest, take our nation back. That's the very end there. And for my second piece of political comedy, I had to show you Gary Cohn, former Trump economic advisor, over on CBS News's Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. And Margaret Brennan asked Gary Cohn, as a former member of the Trump administration, how he reacts to the call for protests and take our nation back. And I mean, I've seen a lot of responses to this. This is kind of the silliest one. That's why I'm putting it here as the second political comedy clip after the TruthSocial post itself, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch together over here.
And we are back now with the former top economic advisor in the Trump administration and currently the vice chairman of IBM, Gary Cohn. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Margaret.
We should also say you also used to run Goldman Sachs many years ago. So that's why I want to talk to you about banking. But first, I want to ask you about the gentleman you used to work for, the 45th president, who may be indicted in the coming days. He's called for protests, and that's raising concerns about violence. Are you concerned about security and what will happen next?
Well, I'm anti-protest, so I don't think we should be protesting anything. I hope that America has learned from what has happened in the past, and I hope whatever happens next week, we just have a very peaceful set of events. When it comes to this, look, no one is above the law, but there also may be some politics involved. So both of these things may be true.
Your own security. Are you concerned?
No, I'm not.
Living in Manhattan. So on the banking.
His own security, is he concerned? Yeah, no, it's hard to believe that a wealthy Republican, like former investment banker, big corporate, whatever, he works for IBM now. It's hard to believe that an ultra wealthy, ultra conservative Republican wouldn't believe in protest. Doesn't believe in protest. Can't understand, what do people have to protest about anyway? In fact, let's just not protest at all. Actually, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I think he was thinking about January 6th. He left the Trump administration well before January 6th, and on January 6th, he actually called for, peace and the end of violence. He tweeted that on January 6th. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that, but I thought that was a little bit amusing. Then something really extra amusing happened back on MSNBC last Tuesday on Ari Melber's program, The Beat. He had on a Trump attorney, I'm probably mispronouncing this, Joe Tacopina, who was there to defend Trump against these charges. And he said a lot of ridiculous things, but one of the most ridiculous was where he tried to claim that Trump didn't lie when he said he didn't know about the payments to Stormy Daniels back during his presidency. And he obviously lied, and you'll see, and Ari Melber calls him on it pretty well, although he gets a little bit red herringed, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that third political comedy clip together over here.
But I'll ask you this. If all of what you say is true,
it is,
then why was Trump hiding it and lying about it at the time? And I'll play that for your response. He lied about it. We all know that.
Take a look.
Take a look.
Let's see.
Mr. President, did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Cohn make it if there was no truth or allegation?
You have to ask Michael Cohn. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Ari, that's what you're going to consider a lie. A lie to me is something material under oath in a proceeding.
Well, I didn't say perjury. I said a lie.
Yeah, but that's not a lie. That's
not a lie?
Here's why it's not a lie.
That's not a lie?
Here's why it's not a lie.
Did you know about this?
Did you put the paper down? Let me answer.
Did you know about this? No, I don't.
No, we don't need that. Here's why it's not a lie.
Yeah.
Because it was a confidential settlement. So if he acknowledged that, he would be violating the confidential settlement. So is it the truth? Of course it's not the truth. Was he supposed to tell the truth? He would be in violation of the agreement if he told the truth. So by him doing that, he was abiding by not only his rights, but Stormy Daniels' rights.
It seems like we're drawing some blood here because you're having a strong reaction. He did lie about it, and in a confidential settlement, you can easily say, no comment, or I'm not getting into it. He says, and the reason why I look at this, he says, no, I didn't know about it. But he did know about it, didn't he?
But here's the thing. I don't know the timing of that video. I really don't. And I'm not trying to play games with you.
April 2018.
Yeah, but I don't know the timing of that video in relation to the timing of the other video where he was speaking to Michael Cohn. What was the date of that other video? Do you know?
Yeah. We have the Cohn recording. This was around the 2016 campaign pre-November. So that was 2018 later. The original conversations were in the fall of 2016. Yes, sir.
So obviously he knew about it, but what he decided to do was not violate the confidentiality clause and provision of that agreement, which was the right thing to do. So, yeah, he could have said no comment, or he could have said, I don't know anything about it, which is what he did. But that's the right. I would advise my client to do the same thing. He's speaking to some, whether it's a journalist or some young lady on the street.
September 2016 is the exact date.
But whether he's speaking to a journalist or some young lady on the street who's shouting out a question, that is not the form for him to go into detailed questions about a confidential settlement agreement.
So let me tell you what I'm hearing, because, again, people...
And Ari Melber, like I said, did a pretty good job there pointing out that a confidential settlement agreement doesn't mean you have to lie. All you have to do is say no comment. There was no requirement for him to lie. And Joe Tacopina there tried to get away with saying, well, to be a lie, it has to be something you say that's untrue and material in court. That's perjury. That's not a lie. And the lie is, the lie is an important part of this criminal case that I'm going to get to when I do my legal analysis here, because you have to have like an intent to deceive as part of the, more than even an intent to defraud or That's part of this criminal statute I'll get to in a little bit. But for my fourth and final political comedy clip, before I get to the news summaries, I saw this ridiculous correction over on the Five, this Fox News program, The Five, where they have like 5 Fox News commentators on at 5 p.m. Eastern. And there's actually one reason I like that show is because they have one person from the left on there. A lot of times, like Outnumbered and the Faulkner Focus, it's just like all conservative. They're all like, yes, I agree. Like everyone agrees with everyone. But this is one of the right-wing pundits on Fox News, Jesse Waters, who I remember from years ago when he used to do ambush interviews for Bill O'Reilly, and now he's got his own show. But he doesn't like the term hush money payments to porn star Stormy Daniels. And you'll hear that over and over again in the news summaries, hush money payments to porn star Stormy Daniels. But he takes exception to part of that, which I will talk about a little more in the final political comedy clip for today over here.
They have the 2 crummiest witnesses of all time. You have a disgraced lawyer who's served time in prison for lying. And then you have a porn actress, not a star, who hangs around with Michael Avenatti. Those are your 2 star witnesses. This is an absolute disgrace. And I'm not going to stand for it.
So yeah, that's Jesse Waters' big problem there is she's not a porn star. She's just an actress. She's not a star. Because I get the feeling Jesse Waters maybe, he knows who the porn stars are and who are, just the up and comers or the has-beens or the never wases, or he apparently is very well versed in what qualifies as stardom in the porn actress communities. And he doesn't think Stormy Daniels qualifies. I don't know how he makes that, but I also makes that decision. But I thought that was pretty humorous for my final political comedy clip. And then I'm going to show you the news summaries, mostly from longest to shortest. They're a little bit, I have a little bit out of order here, but I wanted to first start showing you the Fox News Sunday news summary because they barely mentioned what, they did talk during parts of the program about Trump's claim that he was going to be arrested on Tuesday, but they really didn't say why. They mentioned briefly, and this is like the preview of the program right at the very beginning before they even have the on-camera host start the news summary. Here's the little preview where they said hush money payments, but they didn't say to porn star or porn actress. They didn't say what the hush money payments were for in the little intro part here.
And your money. Then, former President Donald Trump says he expects to be arrested in Manhattan on Tuesday. We'll ask the Sunday panel how the looming charges could upend the 2024 campaign, all right now on Fox News Sunday.
So no, actually they did. That's not the. I'm going to get to the teaser where they mentioned the hush money payments without mentioning Stormy Daniels. That's all in the news summary that I'm about to show you. They don't mention Donald Trump at all. That's the most mention of Donald Trump in the news summary that you get is his claim that he's going to be arrested on Tuesday. And then here's the rest of the news summary, which, as you see, focuses on like Vladimir Putin meeting Xi Jinping from China, the Russian shooting down of this U.S. drone over the Black Sea, and then some mention of failing banks. Nothing in the news summary about Donald Trump and his claim that he's going to be arrested on Tuesday. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. Global powers are flexing this week. Russian President Putin is preparing to welcome his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to Moscow on Monday. This just days after Russia took out a U.S. drone flying in international airspace. China appears to be working more closely with Putin than ever before, backing up his forces occupying Ukraine as NATO allies offer fighter jets to Ukraine. In the middle, the Biden administration under increasing pressure to show strength on the world stage. In a moment, we'll bring in John Kirby, National Security Council spokesperson, for a conversation about the now infamous drone incident and U.S. plans to counter China. But first, let's turn to Alexandria Hoff, live at the White House, for an in-depth look at what Russia is up to. Alex?
Mike, good morning. There is no question that President Putin is looking to strengthen his country's no-limits partnership with China and bolster its war support, even as the Chinese president is trying to frame his visit as diplomatic.
When Chinese President Xi Jinping announced his three-day summit with Vladimir Putin, he said it was for the sake of peace. That's despite U.S. officials warning that China is poised to provide Russia with lethal aid in their assault against Ukraine, and that any ceasefire proposals from Beijing would be blatantly one-sided. The announcement of the meeting was made the same day that the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin, citing
the alleged war crimes of deportation of children from Ukrainian occupied territories into the Russian Federation.
Since the war started, Ukrainian children in regions under Russian occupation have been placed in what's called filtration camps for processing before being transferred to Russia. President Biden spoke to the weight of Putin's title of alleged war criminal.
Well, I think it justified it, but the question is, it's not recognized internationally by us either. But I think it makes a very strong point.
On Friday, the U.S. resumed drone flights over the international waters of the Black Sea. That's after the Pentagon released this video saying it shows Russian jets dumping fuel on the unmanned U.S. drone on Wednesday before one of those Russian jets struck the MQ-9 drone's propeller, prompting U.S. forces to bring it down. The footage showcasing just how quickly the flammable U.S.-Russia relationship could ignite.
Whether or not they hit the drone on purpose, we don't know. But it clearly demonstrates either poor airmanship or reckless behavior.
Russia's defense ministry denies fault, adding that the fighter pilots involved were given state awards.
On the home front, President Biden is still dealing with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, plus concerns that other mid-sized financial institutions may be struggling to stay afloat. Mike?
Alexandria Hoff reporting from the White House. Alex, thanks very much. Thanks. We'll have much more on Silicon Valley Bank and this week's banking crisis, how it impacts your money ahead. Joining me now, John Kirby, the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications. Well,
so you see there that the Fox News Sunday news summary had no mention of Trump's claim he's going to be arrested on Tuesday and that whole issue. It was just briefly mentioned in the news preview that I showed you before. They did mention it much later in the program, like in the last 15 minutes of the 1 hour program, and I'm going to show you that after I finish all the news summaries. First, the teaser, where they did mention the hush money payments, but not the porn star Stormy Daniels part, and then their panel discussion where finally at the very end the word porn star is mentioned by Juan Williams, their commentator on the left. But let me get to the other four news summaries. Now they're from longest to shortest, and I think the best one is the longest one from CBS News' Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, and then Robert Costa really gave the longest, most extensive, most detailed, most informative of the news summaries, and I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We had a sense of deja vu early Saturday when former President Trump hit send on a social media post saying he, quote, will be arrested on Tuesday. Protest, take our nation back. He's referring to the Manhattan case focusing on the alleged hush money payments he made to porn star Stormy Daniels late in the 2016 campaign. That grand jury is still hearing testimony and will need to vote as to whether or not Mr. Trump should be indicted. But his urging support from his followers in advance has caused a political firestorm and has prompted additional security concerns. If Mr. Trump is indicted, that would be yet another first. No sitting or former president has ever been indicted. Our Robert Costa has been reporting on the investigations. He's here with me now. I know you have been speaking to the Trump legal team. What is the broader strategy?
Margaret, good morning. Speaking to Trump's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, and other close allies of the former president, it's evident that in the coming days, with regard to a possible indictment, the legal strategy is going to be combative. They are going to question the scope of any possible felony that's issued for former President Trump. They're going to talk about the timing, and they're going to attack the credibility of Michael Cohn, the longtime Trump lawyer and Trump fixers who's at the center of this case over his payment. But there's a lot of debate in the inner circle about how combative combative to be, including the use of the word protests in the former president's social media language over the weekend. There's some consternation among some allies privately. Maybe that's a bit too far, but they do want to see solidarity with his supporters.
You're gesturing to security concerns there, too. Tell me about what's being planned. I mean, this is unprecedented territory. Bringing in a former president for potential indictment, I mean, how does this work?
What's so surprising in the reporting is that there's not much planning going on, at least between the Trump camp and the Manhattan district attorney. People close to the former president say there are real gaps, tensions between the DA and the Trump team about how this could unfold, whether there would be a perp walk or cameras or the former president walking in, whether he would have a private entrance or not. What we do know is that the Manhattan district attorney, Alvin Bragg, has informed his own colleagues that he will do everything he can to keep them safe, knowing the former president has called for protests. There's a lot of unease inside the Manhattan DA's office at this time. Whenever there is an indictment, should it come, it would be coordinated by NYPD and Secret Service and other local authorities. CBS News has learned there are some conversations among those entities at this moment.
This is also obviously a huge political story. Senator Lindsey Graham said yesterday the prosecutor in New York, quote, has done more to help Donald Trump get elected president than any single person in America today. Is that how the Trump camp sees it?
Well, Senator Graham is a longtime advisor and friend of former President Trump, and the Trump wing of the Republican Party sees this as a very similar moment to what happened when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, that this is going to create a lot of momentum for the president, the former president, in the 2024 race. And what you saw over the weekend right now is a lot of calls for Republicans to speak out in defense of Trump, to come out and say, we're with him. The DA's out of line. There's been pressure on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to speak up more loudly about what is happening to Trump. Some DeSantis allies say they want to have him stay in his own lane. You see former Vice President Mike Pence. He is speaking up, calling any possible indictment politically charged, but he's not trying to weigh in too much on the specifics of the case. That's the balancing act you see from so many Republicans right now. Show anger towards the DA, but don't necessarily rally too much around Trump's side.
Right, and the Trump campaign has been issuing press releases, raising money off of this, and trying to call out those who haven't spoken yet in the former president's defense. But this is just one case in Manhattan. We know there are many other issues legally here, including at the Justice Department with what the special counsel is pursuing. What can you tell us about that?
I can't underscore enough how my reporting shows that while this is a lot of activity in Manhattan in the district attorney's office, the federal grand jury investigation of January 6th is very serious, and former Vice President Mike Pence could face a crossroads this week, whether he will testify or not. We're told by sources the chief judge may force him to testify, but Pence will raise an argument on constitutional grounds that as a former president of the Senate, he should not have to testify about his conversations with Trump about January 6th.
All right. Bob Costa.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I meant at the beginning when I said it's the first, we're just a couple hours into spring, and it looks like this is going to be the season that the Trump indictments are blooming, because there's also this January 6th investigation where Mike Pence might have to testify, where the special counsel Jack Smith is investigating both January 6th and the Mar-a-Lago confidential documents, where they're making one of Trump's lawyers testify to the grand jury. They got past attorney-client privilege with the, well, it could be the crime fraud exception. It's the attorney who wrote the affidavit saying all confidential documents had been returned, but then refused to sign it. And then they're asking him before the grand jury, well, who told you all the documents had been returned? And if it's Donald Trump, well, that's bad news for Trump on that that would be a federal indictment. And then, of course, there's what's going on in Georgia, where you saw that Trump is being investigated for trying to overturn the election results there, where he made phone calls pressuring people. And it's looking like that might even turn into the Georgia version of a RICO prosecution, which is a whole bunch of crimes for, all cobbled together for some, greater organizational purpose or whatever. That's the corrupt organizations in the RICO statute. But the news summary there I thought was pretty good. maybe the best on this topic, but NBC News Meet the Press, Chuck Todd had his news summary, which covered this issue pretty well, but also threw in like the Fox News issue of the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. That may be the most important of the issues this week. Who knows? Trump might not even be indicted, even though that was a big issue in the news summaries. And what's going on with China and Russia, that might have much more long-lasting historical implications. And so, I guess it's always a judgment what you should put in the news summaries, and maybe that was more important. I guess history will have to judge, as Mike Pence will say in a clip I'll show you later. And Chuck Todd also threw in the impact of COVID on the economy and tied it into like the failing banks. I saw in the live comments there that Matthew was bringing up how last week I called Silicon Valley Bank a couple times, but yeah, I'm not the best pronouncer of things anyway, as I've mentioned many times, and sometimes under the stress of broadcast, I won't always say everything right, and I apologize for that. But yeah, no, Silicon Valley, that should be like down like maybe San Fernando Valley in LA, where there are all the silicone breast implants, or and then I guess they use silicone for like some of the injections they do to make people's like lips or other. I think it's like a big plastic surgery thing. So I guess that's where Silicon Valley should be. Silicon Valley is where there's a bank that failed, and I talked about extensively last week. So sorry about that. And speaking of the live comments, I see Lulu Girl's back, hasn't been here for quite a while. And I don't know if you saw last week that I mentioned this was the week that I finally got the floors replaced that were destroyed by my late cat and late dog, Dash and Sandy. And so now we may be able to get a new kitten. I know that was something Lulu Girl asked about a lot before taking your hiatus, so welcome back, and I appreciate I'm almost up to 40 people in the live viewers, so thanks for watching, and let me know what you think of the clips here. I was about to show you the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. That's how I got off on that tangent, because he does mention the failing banks and the effect of COVID on the economy, along with other issues, and I'll talk about that clip after we watch it together over here.
And a good Sunday morning. Brace yourself, folks. It is going to be a whirlwind of a week. It starts with the Russian president. He's hosting Chinese President Xi Jinping in Moscow. It's a pivotal moment in the war. That meeting's on Monday. China is considering whether to arm Russia because Russia's in desperate need of munitions for the war. TikTok CEO under pressure from the Biden administration, which is threatening to fully ban the world's most popular app in this country, will be testifying on the Hill this week. And already former President Donald Trump is attempting to create a circus-like atmosphere, hijack the media narrative, calling for protests ahead of what is an expected indictment sometime this week. It would be the first indictment of a former U.S. president in American history. But we're going to begin with the economy. 3 years ago this week, we probably need a little perspective here, folks. The world began a complete shutdown. Countries began sealing their borders, and social distancing became a catchphrase. This impacted our economy. 3 years later, after 760 million reported COVID cases worldwide, nearly 7 million deaths from the virus, we'd all like to memory hole COVID. But the fallout has been impossible to ignore. 47% of Americans admit it. They say their lives will never return to pre-pandemic normal, according to Gallup. Inflation, of course, has been a big fallout from this shutdown, and it remains stubborn. Government data on Tuesday showed the prices continued to rise in February. The Fed, trying to slow the economy gradually to curb inflation, has been raising rates at one of the fastest rates in decades, pulling back on so-called easy money policies. Supply chain has been slow to recover. The unemployment rate is super low, 3.6%. But millions dropped out of the workforce. Labor force participation rate is well off pre-pandemic highs, and we have a labor shortage because of our strict immigration policies in this country. And now the U.S. economy, which has remained resilient despite all of these challenges, is facing this new test, a crisis in the banking sector, after the failures of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. On Monday, ratings agency Moody's cut its overall outlook for our banking system from stable to negative. Markets had a volatile week, down on Friday as regional bank stocks continued to slide. The Fed is also going to be meeting this week, and they're going to be considering another rate hike. Washington is divided, though, about what right now can be done to stem this crisis.
I'm going to ask Congress and the banking regulators to strengthen the rules for banks to make it less likely this kind of bank failure would happen again.
But it seems as though the regulators didn't do their job. I don't know if they need legislation.
And joining me now is Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. She is a member of the Senate.
And I think that may be why NBC News Meet the Press focused so much on the economy and the banks and stuff, is because they had Elizabeth Warren. She was on a couple of the shows, and that's one of the biases I've noticed, not a partisan political bias like Fox News has, but all the corporate news media has a bias towards skewing their news towards who their exclusive guest is, although Elizabeth Warren wasn't exclusive to NBC. She was also over on CBS News' Face the Nation. And that would be my one criticism of this next clip, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. John Karl had this great interview with former Vice President Mike Pence, and I'm going to show you a 4-minute, 41-second clip of that. That's clip number 12. If you're looking at the brief summaries of the clips I have down in the video description under Media Mentioned. But I think this news summary is a little skewed towards the exclusive Mike Pence interview, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. As we come on the air this morning, local and federal law enforcement are on alert as Donald Trump is again calling himself a victim and calling on his supporters to protest. Trump claims he is going to be arrested on Tuesday under indictment by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. He hasn't said why he thinks this will happen, and his own spokesman said they have received no notification about it from the Manhattan DA. We have asked the DA's office if an indictment is indeed coming, and as of this morning, he has not answered that question. District Attorney Bragg did, however, send a notice to employees of the DA's office saying, quote, "We do not tolerate attempts to intimidate our office or threaten the rule of law in New York." The Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which monitors the online activity of extremist groups, tells us Trump's words have triggered calls for violence, even civil war. I just returned overnight from Iowa, where Trump's statements and the possible actions of the Manhattan DA are very much on the minds of voters I spoke to and the man I interviewed, former Vice President Mike Pence. As you will see, Pence made some of his sharpest criticism yet of Trump in our interview. He told me it is time for Republicans to turn the page on the Trump era. He declined to say whether he would ever support Trump again for president, even if he is the Republican nominee. But as you will see, Pence also had pointed words about the Manhattan DA, and that's where our interview begins.
And like I said, I'll show you the beginning of the interview, not as far as where he won't say whether he'll support Trump for president. You know, I think we'll have better choices. I think voters will have better choices. He's used that line, but I mean, that's almost political comedy, or I almost used as political comedy, because he's now said explicitly, this is a man who put me and my family in danger on January 6th, but I might still support him for president. That I don't get that, but I'll get to the Mike Pence clip, like I said, clip 12, and do you think that's a biased news summary where a third of the 97 seconds was devoted to the Mike Pence interview, which was upcoming? I don't know, maybe it was just a transition and it's not actual bias. But anyway, I'm going to get to the final news summary, the shortest news summary. Jake Tapper over on CNN State of the Union, under 90 seconds, but still covering it all, or covering the big topic over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is on edge after calling for protests. Donald Trump has everyone's attention once again as the former president and his team prepare for the possibility he could be indicted in New York City this week. What would be the first ever criminal charges against a former U.S. president. In a social media post yesterday, Trump claimed he expected to be arrested on Tuesday, and he called for his supporters to, quote, protest, take our nation back, unquote, echoing his calls for protests prior to January 6, 2021. Trump's attorney later told CNN that the The Tuesday claim was based on media reports. We do know District Attorney Alvin Bragg appears to be building a case against Trump stemming from that hush money payment to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 campaign, potentially including whether Trump falsified business documents to cover up that payment and whether that was a campaign finance violation. Combining those two alleged offenses and making them a felony charge would be a risky, untested legal approach, experts say. And sources tell CNN that Trump thinks this could all help him politically. Bragg's response to Trump was a statement that his office will not tolerate intimidation attempts. The case continues, and the grand jury in this case is set to hear from another witness on Monday, according to a source. Joining me now to discuss and much more is the Republican governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu.
And I will have a clip of that Chris Sununu questioning. I don't know if Chris Sununu is going to run for president. He would be one of those people running in the anti-Trump lane. And you'll see he still has some negative things to say about this prosecution. And that will be clip 13 when I get to it. I mean, I think that the Jake Tapper news summary there was pretty good, and I thought it was interesting how when he showed that TruthSocial post from Trump, they actually had like yellow highlighting on the last words, "Protests take our nation back," which might be the most disturbing part of that. And that actually was barely mentioned on Fox News Sunday. They did have the Biden National Security Council communications guy on to talk about the whether that statement from Trump that, whether there were any national security threats from that, and he said no. That was like the only mention in that interview that Mike Emanuel did. I don't know why I'm blanking on that guy's name. The NSA communications spokesperson John Kirby is the NSC coordinator for strategic communications. Thank you, Google. So he's the one who they had on Fox News Sunday yesterday. Mike Emanuel interviewed, and at the very end of the interview, Mike Emanuel asked John Kirby about that TruthSocial post from Trump and if it had caused any sort of threats, that, if there were any threats to national security or to domestic tranquility or whatever. And he said that they weren't tracking any threats, but who knows? Well, there's no arrest, and it's not on Tuesday, so maybe that's why. But that was the one place on Fox News Sunday where they mentioned that. And then I also showed you how they almost never in the entire program mentioned what was the crime about. What was Trump being charged for, or what was he saying he was going to be arrested for? There was one brief, like 10-second part in a little teaser for the panel discussion where I mentioned earlier, they said hush money payments, but they didn't say what the hush money payments were for. That's right over here.
All right, we have to take a break here. Up next, former President Trump claims his arrest is imminent over the years-long investigation surrounding alleged hush money payments during his 2016 campaign. Our panel weighs in next.
Alleged hush money payments in 2016. That's probably as diluted as you can explain what the charges, the possible charges are, or as minor as you can make them sound. I don't know. And then kudos to Juan Williams. Finally, at the very end of this panel discussion here, he's the one person who actually says paying hush money to a porn star. Paying hush money to a porn star, but you almost don't even get to hear it because there's a lot of crosstalk going on. But this is the whole panel discussion. This is as much as they talked about Trump's claim that he's going to be arrested on Tuesday. And you'll see almost the entire time what they talk about is the political implications, not what the actual crime is. And all the other people talking about it, they like use really, really vague terms to avoid saying what the crime is about. And I'll talk about that. And then I'll actually explain what the crime is about using multiple still images. I have if you're looking down in the video description, after clip 11, which I'm about to show you, I have 11A, 11B, 11C, 11D, and 11E. All are still images that I'm going to use to commit some legal analysis about this charge against Donald Trump. And you don't hear very much about it on the Fox News Sunday program, however, as I'll discuss with you a little more after we watch that panel discussion together over here.
I want to be crystal clear that we should not want to live in a country where the party in power is able to use police force to arrest its political opposition. And I do not want to see that day come to pass in this country.
Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy criticizing reports of a looming indictment of former President Trump, and then on Twitter calling it un-American for a ruling party to use its power to arrest its political opponents. And we're back now with the panel. So former President Trump actually dropped the bombshell himself, saying, quote, "The far and away leading Republican candidate and former president of the United States of America will be arrested on Tuesday of next week. Protest, take our nation back." Michael, how unprecedented is this, and what's the impact on 2024?
It's incredibly unprecedented. This sort of sounds like old technical things that no one understands. I really wish this wouldn't happen. I think the country needs to look forward to a new generation of leadership and quit litigating the past. But the effect I think it has on 2024 is that I believe people who are already very, very pro-Trump will get very upset, as will other Republicans. But I think it begins to remind people that President Trump has a lot of things in his past that may be something that Republicans need to look forward instead of looking behind and figure out a way to win next time rather than being reminded of some issues during his presidency.
Francesca, you want to jump in on this one?
Well, prospective Republican candidates are having to determine right now whether they want to weigh in publicly and support the former president, or if they want to say, look, this is another reason why we need to move on from Donald Trump. And you saw Mike Pence try to thread that needle yesterday by saying that he thought that it was politically motivated, whereas you've not seen Ron DeSantis so far, last that we checked, say much about this at all. But to your point, the Democrats I've been talking to over the last 24 hours have been telling me that they could absolutely see a situation where this boosts his fundraising, where this boosts his poll numbers in the short term. And of course, they think in the long term that helps them in the general election, but that it could help him with his base.
Here is South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham's take on it.
The prosecutor in New York has done more to help Donald Trump get elected president than any single person in America today. This is selective prosecution. If I were President Trump, I'd take this all the way to the damn Supreme Court.
Juan, do you worry that this could make former President Trump a martyr in the eyes of some American voters, a political martyr?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's doing. Yesterday when he called for protest, look, he wants a protest because he wants a political circus to distract from the idea that there are real criminal charges. The prosecutor in New York was reluctant to bring charges. We don't know if there's some new evidence or new reason for this prosecutor to act, but he's acting. And there's a real criminal charge here. That's not politics. But Trump wants a political circus because he says, you know what, everybody's going to say, maybe we shouldn't do this, a former president. You know what, he's also, by the way, potentially going to face charges in Fulton County, Georgia, for charges of election interference. And then there's the special prosecutor case about taking classified documents to Mar-a-Lago. Those are even more substantial criminal charges that he might face. And I think Trump is all about, this is politics. This is a regime, a democratic regime. It's not about that. Look at the actual case. He actually is being charged with substantial crimes.
We got to get Jason in here.
I totally disagree with you. For 6 years, all we've heard is Donald Trump did this, Donald Trump did that. They've never charged him. And of all the things they're going to charge him for, supposedly, this, a state crime in a federal race. How does that work? The statute of limitations, that's a problem. It was a nuisance payment here. And you know what people are sick and tired of? Is the idea that they're going to come again after Donald Trump for paying some money, supposedly, to deal with the nuisance charge. Meanwhile, the Bidens are taking millions out of China, and nobody says a word. Nobody goes after that. Nobody even pays attention to that.
If you have any evidence, put it on the table. There's no evidence.
There is a lot of evidence to that.
Money out of
there
China.
are bank statements and transactions.
Look, this week, Jim Comer at the House said, oh, yeah, here's this bank statement that went to Joe Biden's former, I think it was Joe Biden's
his daughter-in-law is a school counselor. She gets $35,000.
It was from a business person who would have been giving her money before. It was so frivolous. I mean, if you talk about money, let's talk about money to someone like Jared Kushner from the Saudis. But here's the thing. When you
this
look
is
at
why
this,
there's conflict.
No, but
because
this is
they see a two-tier system of justice.
What two-tier?
They see them. They're going after Donald Trump all day long.
You pay off a porn star in order to silence her in the midst of a presidential campaign, and that's okay.
That's a federal issue.
Let's go to the other side of the table. Francesca, Republicans.
And that was all the discussion on the Fox News Sunday panel. Jason Chaffetz, former member of Congress from Utah, what an annoying guy. He was like one of the big players in Benghazi all the time after Hillary Clinton for Benghazi, but now he's downplaying all this. I mean, some of the things he said there were just so ridiculous. About, for 6 years they kept saying he did all this stuff and he's never been charged. Well, now maybe he's finally going to be charged. And you notice Jason Chaffetz never even mentioned, the hush money payments to the porn star. Oh, and it's a state charge. How do you get it to, it's a how do you make a state charge out of a federal case? And that was really exasperating, especially as a lawyer to listen to. Now, one of the things he mentioned, the statute of limitations, I think that might be a good argument for Donald Trump. All of even a felony in New York, the statute of limitations on the felony is 5 years, and all of this took place like 2017 at the latest, was like when Trump repaid Michael Cohen or whatever. And that's more than 5 years ago. But apparently the statute of limitations was told during COVID. Told means it doesn't run for some of the time. And there's something in New York where, like, if you're out of state, the statute of limitations stops running. If you're continuously out of state for a long period of time. And Trump, of course, was out of New York for a long period of time. So, but that's like an appellate issue, or it's an issue that the Trump campaign or the Trump defense could raise. The whole thing about how, like, they're using a felony that wasn't even a crime, or that whole thing. Now, for my long-term viewers, back when I was doing my Sunday clip roundups, for weeks, maybe months, maybe years, like, down in the video description, I put links to all these different, like, statutes and legal resources. And one of the things I had down there for a long time is Michael Cohen's plea allocution, and I put that down under sources in the video description. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to a bunch of things, and two of the crimes he pled guilty to were hush money payments, using the National Enquirer in one of the cases, and one was Stormy Daniels. The other one, what was her name? I think it was Karen McDougal, maybe. And so there were two counts in which Michael Cohen pled guilty in federal court, not state court, in the Southern District of New York. In federal court, he pled guilty to these campaign finance crimes. And in his what's called the plea allocution, what he says when he's pleading guilty, he said he was directed to do it by this candidate for federal office. It was, of course, Donald Trump. And the thing about a plea allocution, that it's not just Michael Cohen saying it under oath. the prosecutors in the case are not supposed to accept the plea unless they have a reasonable basis to believe that what he's saying is true. And this, of course, these are this is the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office appointed by Donald Trump. This is the Trump Justice Department taking this plea from Michael Cohen. And the judge also isn't supposed to accept it if there's not a reasonable basis for what he says. I put the link down there to the plea allocution, but here's like the important page. I don't know, can you even read that here? But I've highlighted the word directed there, where he says that as to count number 7, on or about the summer of 2016, in coordination with and at the direction of a candidate for federal office, I and the CEO of a media company, at the request of the candidate, worked together to keep an individual with information that would be harmful to the candidate and to the campaign from publicly disclosing this information. It took place in Manhattan for the principal purpose of influencing the election. And same thing for count 8, right below that. It's at the direction of the same candidate, a payment to a second individual. And that's the Stormy Daniels one is the second one, because it doesn't involve, what's his name, David Pecker from the National Enquirer, who was involved in that first one. But yeah, Michael Cohen, on that page, you can read it yourself. He said that he said under oath in his plea allocution that he was directed by Donald Trump to commit those crimes. And by the way, if you look at the federal statute 18 U.S.C. Section 2, whoever commits an offense against the United States or aids, abets, counsels, commands, induces, or procures its commission is punishable as a principal. Whoever causes an act to be done, which if directly performed by him or another would be an offense, is punishable as a principal. That means if Donald Trump directed Michael Cohen to commit that federal felony that he pled guilty to, he's guilty of a felony. And why it is that Donald Trump was never prosecuted? Well, the Department of Justice thought that he couldn't be prosecuted when he was president. I don't know why the Biden Justice Department never followed up on that. I mean, if Michael Cohen's guilty of committing that crime at Trump's direction, he should have been prosecuted. Now, this current New York law, you can see here, this is the felony that Trump is claiming. Now, the thing about the Trump claiming he's going to be arrested and, the indictment is bogus and the thing is, until you can know what the charge is and you can read the indictment and all the facts, I don't know how you can claim that the prosecution is bogus until you actually see the charge. I mean, as a former criminal defense attorney, I'm perfectly happy saying that a prosecutor has filed a bogus charge, but I'm not going to do it until I actually see the indictment and the charge. And we don't even know what they're going to be charging in New York, but what they're claiming is it's going to be under this Penal Code section 175.10, falsifying business records in the first degree. And you can see here, this is a person is guilty of falsifying business records in the first degree when he commits the crime of falsifying business records in the second degree with his intent to defraud includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof, and that's the felony. And so they're saying is a federal, I've seen a bunch of people saying, well, it doesn't include federal crimes, but it does actually. If you look at what the definition of a crime is, this is New York Code, Penal Code Section 10, their definitions, and a crime is just any misdemeanor or felony. And you notice up at the top, an offense is actually a New York offense, but crime can mean any misdemeanor or felony. And as I already mentioned, Donald Trump supposedly directed Michael Cohen to commit multiple federal felonies, as he said in his plea allocution. Oh, and then one of the Trump defenses supposedly is that he wasn't paying the money to Stormy Daniels long after the affair, but right before the election, to affect the campaign. He was doing it because he didn't want to be embarrassed. He didn't want Melania to find out. But I've also put a link down in the video description to this tweet from Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, who wrote like a tell-all book about her friendship with Melania. She was like a confidant of Melania's, and Melania Trump apparently already knew about the affair. So the hush money payment wasn't to stop Melania from knowing. So that was some of the points I wanted to make about whether, I mean, like I said, I don't feel like I can really analyze the charges against Trump until he's actually charged. When you can actually read the charges, read the indictment, all the facts, and check it with the law. But some of the things that they're trying to throw out there to make it seem like this is, you know, there's no underlying crime. Well, then why did Michael Cohen go to prison? Why did he plead guilty to being directed to commit felonies by Donald Trump if he didn't actually do it? But anyway, I want to show you the 3 newsmaker clips I have for you. These are 3 different Republicans trying to deal with this. It's former Vice President Mike Pence, then New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, and finally, was it North Dakota Senator Mike Rounds? I think he's North Dakota. One of those like states up in the middle and the north of the country. Maybe it's South Dakota. Is Mike Rounds South Dakota? Anyway, I'll check and I'll let you know. But here's Mike Pence. He's saying a couple things. Jonathan Karl on ABC lets him get away with saying, you know, this is that apparently the Trump prosecution is Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA's top priority. That's like a bogus premise to his reaction to this, and I'll talk about the rest of what he says a little more after we watch together over here.
As I'm sure you've seen, Donald Trump is saying that he's going to be indicted on Tuesday. He's calling for people to protest. Now, we don't know if that's true. The Manhattan DA has not said anything about it, but he's calling for people to protest. Is that irresponsible?
Well, first, let me say I'm taken aback at the idea of indicting a former president of the United States at a time when there's a crime wave in New York City. That the fact that the Manhattan DA thinks that indicting President Trump is his top priority, I think, just tells you everything you need to know about the radical left in this country. It just feels like a politically charged prosecution here, and I, for my part, I just feel like it's just not what the American people want to see. We got real challenges in this country today, John. People are facing record inflation, a crisis at our border. We have war in Eastern Europe. The American people are anxious about the future. And here we go again, back into another politically charged prosecution directed at the former president of the United States. And I would just hope for better.
But he's calling on people to protest, to come out and protest, take our nation back. We know what happened the last time he said that.
Well, John, the American people have a constitutional right to peaceably assemble.
Absolutely, but to have a former president calling on people to protest a justice proceeding.
The frustration the American people feel about what they sense is a two-tiered justice system in this country, I think is well-founded. But I believe that people understand that if they give voice to this, if this occurs on Tuesday, that they need to do so peacefully and in a lawful manner. That the violence that occurred on January 6th, the violence that occurred in cities throughout this country in the summer of 2020 was a disgrace. The American people won't tolerate it, and those that engage in that kind of violence should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
But you say he's a former president possibly about to be indicted, and it's unprecedented. Aren't his actions unprecedented? I mean, we never saw a presidential candidate give $130,000 to a porn star to keep her from talking. I mean, these are unprecedented actions.
Well, John, as you know, those events transpired before I even joined the national ticket, and so I can't speak to the merits of the case.
The payoff happened just 2 weeks before the election.
But I can't speak to the merits of the case. Yeah. And in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. That's not always true in the national media, but it is true in our justice system. And look, I know that President Trump can take care of himself. And this process will play out if, in fact, an indictment comes down.
So I want to ask you about your recent remarks about Donald Trump and January 6th. You said that history will hold Donald Trump accountable. How?
Well, we all face the judgment of history. And I believe in the fullness of time that history will hold Donald Trump accountable for the events of January 6th, as it will other people that were involved.
In what way? So what will history say about his actions?
Well, it'll be the judgment of history. I truly believe it. And I also think the American people will also have their say. I mean, the president is now a candidate for office again. He's running for election. But as I go around the country, I'm convinced the American people have learned the lessons of that day. They've internalized what they have learned over the last 2 years, including in much of your good work on this topic. They know what happened. They know the fact that the president's reckless words endangered people at the Capitol that day, including me and my family. And I believe they'll factor all of that in as they make decisions going forward in this country. They'll make their own judgment about what happened on January 6th. They'll make their own judgment about this administration and its failures at home and abroad. And I think ultimately history will hold Donald Trump accountable for that day.
Trump actually...
And it's such a bogus evasion, and Jonathan Karl kind of called him on it. He's like, it'll be the judgment of history. And he said, and so Jonathan Karl, well, what will history say? Well, it'll be history's judgment and the people will judge. It's like a big evasion. So he doesn't have to say what's his judgment. Like, how does he judge what Donald Trump did? And I think we're going to be, if Mike Pence runs for president, which I think he's going to do, I think we're going to hear a lot of that, like, judgment of history, judgment of the people, don't ask my judgment evasion. And he also was very judgmental in contrast of this indictment of Donald Trump from the New York District Attorney's Office that hasn't even occurred. How does he know it's bogus and political when we haven't even seen the indictment and read it, like I was saying? And you can see some of the same, I think, jumping to conclusions from another person looking for, Mike Pence isn't really the anti-Trump lane. I don't know where Mike Pence is trying to run for president, because there's like the Trump or Trump light lane, that's Trump and Ron DeSantis, or the anti-Trump lane, which is a much smaller lane, and maybe Mike Pence is trying to fit into it, or maybe Chris Sununu will. You can let me know what you think after we watch this penultimate newsmaker clip together over here.
With Trump saying that he expects to be charged by the Manhattan DA, what's your reaction?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of unknowns. I can tell you, I think it's building a lot of sympathy for the former president. I think the fact that I was with coffee this morning with some folks, and there's none of them were big Trump supporters, but they all said, they felt like he was being attacked. And as you pointed out, this is likely some sort of misdemeanor on an issue 7 years ago. This has nothing to do with January 6th. There's folks out there that still think this has something to do with January 6th. So I just think that the not just the media, but really a lot of the Democrats have misplayed this in terms of building sympathy for the former president, and it does drastically change the paradigm as we go into the 24 election.
The former president has also called for, quote, protests, and he's urging supporters to, quote, take our country back. Obviously, every American has the constitutional right to peaceful protest. But do you think former President Trump has a special responsibility here to make sure that his supporters protest peacefully after what happened on January 6th?
Well, sure. Look, if someone's calling for protests, you always want to make sure that they're peaceful. And we know that that's going to happen. It has happened before in long history, in recent history in America. Folks always are out there protesting what they see as an unjustified arrest or an unjustified indictment. But you want to make sure it's peaceful. We don't want history to repeat itself in overly negative ways. But So that's going to happen out there, and it's not, you can't just put it on the former president. It's our responsibility, right, in society, in our communities, to make sure that if we have something to say, we're doing it in the right way, and making sure that we're making a positive effect going forward. But it is going to be a circus, right? It is going to be a bit of a political circus. There's going to be a lot of unknowns. As you brought up, this could be a misdemeanor. This was tried, I believe something similar was tried against Edwards, the former presidential candidate, years ago, and got nowhere. So this is untested. There's a question about the why they're doing it, something 7 years ago. It's not a nothing, but it's moving money and how he claimed money being moved between him and his lawyer. There are other issues that really take precedent in terms of where this country needs to go, what we need to do to get stuff done, how we manage our budgets, how we secure the border. There's much more pressing issues of the day. It's just unfortunate this is taking the headline.
Well, let's turn to one of those pressing issues.
And then they go to different issues, but I thought that Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire there, got away with saying negative things about a prosecution where we haven't even seen the charges, and 7 years ago, misdemeanor. Well, it looks like it's going to be a felony, a misdemeanor with the intent to conceal, or the intent to further the felony that that Michael Cohn pled guilty to in federal court that I was talking about earlier. And then anyway, the final clip I want to show you is Chuck Todd talking to South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds. I looked it up. Sorry, I get my Dakotas mixed up. It's not as bad as saying Silicon Valley, I guess, but or maybe it is, which is worse. But anyway, this is the last newsmaker clip. Chuck Todd talking to Mike Rounds, both about the Trump claim that he's going to be, that his call for protests and to take our nation back. And then he asks Mike Rounds about whether he regrets not voting to convict Trump in the after the second impeachment in the last few weeks of Trump's term, after January 6th. And I will talk about that final newsmaker clip a little more after we watch it together over here.
Let me ask you about former President Trump and his call for protesters to the Manhattan courthouse next week. You think that's appropriate behavior?
To begin with, let me make it clear, there's a difference between the former president and what he did on January 6th as the president of the United States and his call for support at the Capitol versus an individual person today asking people to show up to protest if he is indicted, and recognizing that I'm assuming that you're talking about the possibility of an indictment, which has not yet
we have no idea
happened. Right? And second of all, we don't know what the indictments would be. So we're kind of getting into some grounds in which we're making some assumptions that we don't have a whole lot of facts on.
Well, he made the assumption.
It might be better to ask those same questions later on.
I understand that. Are you at all concerned, though, that this only adds to distrust? It's sort of almost he's fomenting the distrust.
Yeah, look, I don't know if he's fomenting distrust or not, but clearly we don't know whether or not this is actually going to happen. We don't know whether or not there's actually going to be an indictment. Clearly, he's following some leaks, apparently, that are coming out of a DA's office that should not happen. But most certainly, you don't want to have any threats towards the implementation or the attempt to implement justice. And that's something that you always have to take seriously, whether it's from an individual person or a former president of the United States.
I'm just curious, have you ever had second thoughts about your decision not to vote to convict after January 6th with former President Trump?
It's very clear in the Constitution and the way that the Founding Fathers had laid that out, that you were looking at whether or not an individual was the President of the United States or was just an individual. At the time of that trial, Mr. Trump at that time was an individual. He was not the President of the United States. Founding Fathers clearly did not want indictments to start on former presidents. They didn't want that to happen. They saw it going on in England at the time, and most certainly they don't want, and they didn't feel that it was appropriate to go back in and find former officers of the United States and impeach them.
You could have barred him from ever running for office again. That was the point of that exercise.
Actually, the idea behind an impeachment is to take away the shield of office.
Yeah.
That's all it does. After that, other things can occur. And right now, the shield of office is gone, and now it's up to the courts.
All right. Mike Rounds, Republican senator from South Dakota, former governor of South Dakota as well. It's always good.
Oh, former governor of South Dakota. I didn't realize that, but yeah. So that's the final newsmaker clip. I thought some of what Mike Rounds said there was kind of bogus. He claimed it's clear in the Constitution that if a president in the last few weeks of his term is impeached, that he can't be convicted after his term ends, and then there's no removal from office, but they could bar him from running in future elections. Like Chuck Todd said, I'm telling you, it is not clear in the Constitution. Here, I have like a 10-pack of ACLU constitutions. If anyone wants to become a $5 patron on Patreon at the link right under the video, or to give me a one-time PayPal contribution of $5, I will send you one. I have like 10 ACLU constitutions. I want to send them out. And you can look at the clauses about impeachment and conviction and removal and barring from running for office. In fact, for $5, I'll not only send you this constitution if you're in the United States and give me your shipping address, I'll also give you this #LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker. So yeah, I was just looking at my video and it's already been demonetized. I don't know if it's because I had Stormy Daniels or in porn star or something in my video description. Hopefully on review it will get, on my appeal it'll be monetized, but that's why I really depend on the patrons on Patreon, the one-time PayPal contributors at the links right underneath the video there, or I also appreciate Lulu Girl and Matthew giving those super chat contributions during the program. All those things are supporting me and making me feel good about my decision to keep going for 2 more years through the 2024 presidential election cycle to continue doing this live stream. I appreciate all those supportive comments. I saw people saying good things about my show and how they liked me doing all the work, and I saw Matthew saying that my show was relaxing, and so I was reading a lot of the live comments along the way, so thank you for that. Thank you to the recorded show viewers who post comments later, and if you have something you disagree with me about, post it in the recorded show comments, because that's where I really have time to engage with my viewers, and hopefully this week I'll have time. But anyway, I will be back next week and every week through the 2024 presidential election cycle. I hope you appreciated all the time and effort I put into this broadcast and all my broadcasts. Until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.